Rachel Lee from the organization Help for Domestic Workers. I hope I got that right.
Yes.
Good. Good. Rachel is the case management leader at Help. She has a team that helps individuals, OFWs like yourselves. If an employer is not following their contract responsibilities, Rachel and her team assist where they can. Let me share just a little bit more background. Rachel has been with Help, I'm not sure, 2 years. 2 years now. She is an attorney or a lawyer, and she's good. She helped one of our sisters from the Everyday Branch. If you all recall, Mary Ann, who was here and left over the summer. Mary Ann was terminated by her employer after working there for about, I think, 6 years. She was entitled to severance,
Yes.
but her employer set her up for immediate termination. So she would receive nothing.
Oh.
President Sweeney and Sister Sweeney brought Mary Ann over to meet with Rachel. Rachel went through her case and not only got her severance pay, but also got the employer to pay for her trip home. So, can help you? Yes, they can. Now, what Rachel will share with you today is your rights. It's important to know your rights. As OFWs, it's difficult. You're trying to support your family, you're trying to manage, you want to please your employer, but there are limits on what you should stand for or tolerate in terms of breaking of the contract. Anyhow, I'll talk less. I'll turn the time over to Rachel. And Rachel, my guess is you can probably project well from where you are, but would a mic be helpful?
Can you all hear me? Is it okay? I guess
Yes.
it's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Kamusta ka? So my name is Rachel. I'm from Help for Domestic Workers. Some of you may know us from when we were back in St. John's Cathedral. We used to be based there, but we've become an independent organization since 2021. So we're now in Sheung-Wan. So today I'm here to share a little bit about what you should know working as a domestic workers in Hong Kong. I'm sure a lot of you have worked in Hong Kong for a long time already, so some of these might be a little bit basic, but we have other modules too, so welcome to join our other classes. And I don't want to be like talking at you, so if you have questions or interesting experience you want to share, feel free to just raise your hands and we can have like an interactive, fun discussion, okay? So, as I mentioned, Help used to be at St. John's Cathedral. We were actually founded in 1989. Our programs focus on 3 things. The first thing is to prevent crisis. So we do this by delivering education classes to domestic workers, OFWs like you guys. But we also educate employers because the employment relationship has 2 people in it, right? So we want to make sure that we also inform employers what their responsibilities are in order to prevent unpleasant things from happening, in order to make sure everybody is happy in the employment relationship. So the second pillar is what President Stone mentioned, to respond to crisis. So I myself am a lawyer, and my team provides direct advice and assistance to OFWs who are in crisis, like Mary Ann. Sometimes we get cases that are more serious, like workers who are really abused and they need to leave immediately, they need to go to a shelter, or they may have labor tribunal claims, complicated legal issues. So we assist with everything, all kind of matters from labor disputes to if they have issue with their loan company, for example, like money lending issues, or if they have issue with immigration, they may have overstayed without knowing that they overstayed, etc. So everything legal, my team helps. The third pillar is to build resilience in the community. So we do this by providing our very popular physical activity classes. So you can see these ladies doing yoga. We also have mental health counseling programs. So if you're interested, you can connect with me and I can share more information with you. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have various other modules under our education programs. This is just our first module on basic Know Your Rights. So yeah, before I start, this is our contact information, our telephone and WhatsApp. I also have some calling cards here, so feel free to come and take some of our calling cards. I'm afraid the QR code doesn't work, I'm very sorry, I just realized, but the WhatsApp number is there, the phone number. And I have some QR codes, so you can, some calling cards, so you can take it with our information. So if you or your friends ever need help, feel free to contact us. Okay, so let's start. I guess maybe I can share a little bit more about why I do this work. So I was brought up by a dede until I was 14. So I've always been very grateful. My dede is like my sister to me. She used to buy halo halo for me when I was a kid. That's why I was very fat. I ate too much halo halo. But yeah, I've always been very grateful of my domestic worker who looked after myself and my brother. But unfortunately, I think OFWs in Hong Kong sometimes don't get the respect that they deserve. And a lot of employers, unfortunately, don't follow the rules and protections for domestic workers. So it's really important for you to know what are your rights, so in case something happens, you know how to deal with that situation. Okay, so let's start the basics. So I guess everybody knows that your the standard length of employment is for 2 years, right? Yes. During COVID, you used to be able to apply for deferral of home leave, but that has become more difficult now because like international travel is again very common. Do you guys know if it's possible to extend your visa for just a short period of time? So for example, if you finish your 2 years and your employer said, oh, actually, I need you for another 2 months, can you just extend by a short period of time? Is that possible? Yes, yeah, it's possible. You just need to submit an application to the immigration department. So let's say you finish contract. So you're waiting for your new visa in Hong Kong, and your new employer told you, can you just come and start working for me before your new visa comes in? Can you do that? No. Why not? Yes, it's actually not legal to start work before your work visa comes in, even if you're already in Hong Kong. So a lot of OFW falls into this trap. They may start working for the employer before their visa comes in. So make sure that you don't do that, because it is possible that the immigration department do like routine checks and finds you working without the proper visa. And is there a probation period for domestic worker? Is it so like in other jobs sometimes there could be like a 3 months probation, and during this time you try to be on your best behavior so that your employer will continue with your employment. Do we have the same thing with domestic workers? You think so?
Is it 3 months?
Is it 3 months? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, as far as I know, they said it's 3 months.
So actually, contractually, there is no probation period for domestic workers. Yeah. So if your employer tells you something like, oh, you have a 3-month probation or you have a 2-month probation, it's not technically in the contract. So the employer cannot impose additional requirement based on the probation period. So the employer cannot say, for example, during your probation period, you cannot take Sunday off. That's not reasonable and also not legal. So just be mindful of that. There's no probation period for domestic. Yes.
I want to ask a question that how about the statutory holiday? Is it still like you need to wait for 3 months?
So that's a really good question. So you, in your first 3 months of your employment, you can take statutory holiday, but technically the employer doesn't have to pay you.
Yes.
So you can still take it, but the employer doesn't have to pay you. Yes. Okay, I'm just going to continue, but feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. So this is the standard employment contract. You all have seen it, I'm sure. What I want to emphasize is sometimes employer may ask you to sign like a different paper or like an additional agreement to this. That is not allowed under Hong Kong law, okay? This is the only contract that is recognized by the Hong Kong government. So if sometimes employers are very sneaky, they may say, oh, I want to change, I don't know, like I want to change this term, that term, I made a new contract. That is not possible. So your employment is governed by only this one document. And how many of you have read your contract from page 1 to page 4? Like the whole thing? Some of you? Yes. So I encourage you, when you go home, to actually read your contract from page 1 to page 4. Because this contract sets out all the basic information that you need to know, even if you might have worked in Hong Kong for a really long time. Sometimes it's easy to forget. Sometimes things change. So for example, in the last 5 years or so, they added a clause saying that workers cannot reach their body out to clean windows because unfortunately there were a few accidents where workers fell to their death. So these are new things that are added. So I encourage you all to read your contract.
Yes.
It's not too difficult. It's like simple English, and it's good to know what's in the contract. Okay. Work visa. So most of you probably have a work visa like this attached to your passport when you enter Hong Kong. Some of you may have the A4 paper, the white paper. So the work visa is important because it provides the start date of your employment. Okay, so let's say when you finish your contract or if your contract is terminated, how we calculate or prepare computation is based on the day you enter Hong Kong. So it's important that you know when you actually start work. So for example, this person started December 30th, and because of 2 years, right? So the the visa is valid until December 30, 2015, for example. Okay, so sometimes, especially now, the immigration do a lot of the things online, so you may have like an e-visa, e-copy of this and that. Just make sure you keep a copy and double check so that you know what your own employment terms are. Okay, work address. This one is tricky. I think everybody knows that you have to work in the address stated on the contract, right? But what if, let's say, your employer came and your employer said, oh, can you go and clean my mother-in-law's house? Is that allowed? No. Yeah. So
But they do.
You can only work and live on the address that is on your contract. I've had a few cases where workers never read their contract and then they only realize later that the address on the contract is different from the address that they're actually working in. So this is again something to remind each other and check whenever you start work with a new employer, because again this can be tricky, because if there is ever an issue and let's say you have a labor claim, it may become an issue at the labor department. The officer may say, why are you working at an address that is different from your contractual address? Because it is technically breaching your condition of stay, which can be serious. So what should you do if your employer is asking you to, oh, can you clean my I have a second house in this area. Can you go clean my second house? Or can you go look after my auntie's dog when she's away? Like what should you do if this happened? Anyone has experience of this, like being asked to work at a different Yeah. So what did you do?
I asked my employer that you allowed to clean my mother's house, but I said no. First, I said it, okay, I help, but the next day, I asked my employer, I think that my contract, and then he read it, and then he asked me, he did not talk, he go.
Yeah.
Then next day, he did not
He didn't say anything. That's good. Like, so it's important to explain to your employer that you cannot work at an address other than that stated on your contract, because otherwise it would be a breach of your contract and also the immigration laws in Hong Kong. So I want to share something that's come up recently with you all. So I have a few cases where workers are working at their employer's address, but the employer is using their house as like Airbnb. Do you guys know Airbnb? Like they're renting it out for travelers. And then the worker ended up being arrested for helping to operate an unlicensed hotel or guest house, which is a offense in Hong Kong. So this is a new trend that I'm seeing. So if any of your friends or yourself is in this situation, just be a bit mindful, because even though you are quite passive in this situation, innocent, your employer lives there, you work there, it's not your fault that they are operating it as an Airbnb, but you may end up being implicated if there's enforcement action against. So Airbnb is actually not legal in Hong Kong. It's not related to domestic work, but just for your information, because it's not a licensed guest house. So this is an interesting issue that came up recently. Just want to share with you all. So if your employer moves, you make sure that you and your employer informs the immigration within 7 days. Okay. Yeah, so this is the form to use to inform the immigration if there's any change to the duties or the address, etc., etc. Okay, wages. The current minimum wage is 4,990, and the food allowance is 1,236. Am I correct? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So how many of you receive your wages in cash?
Gosh.
Do you sign a wage receipt?
Yes.
Okay, good. You all are very professional. Okay.
No, I don't
You
know.
don't. You don't. Okay. How about bank transfer? Yes, President Scott.
Question on the minimum wage. I thought it was 4,730.
So it's been adjusted, I think, in September 2024. So the government adjusted every year because of inflation. So this is the latest minimum wage. But if the contract is signed before, I think this is September 2024, then it's still on the previous year's minimum wage. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if the contract was signed in 2022, it would still be for
7:30. Yes.
Okay, so for you guys who receive your salary in cash, it's always a good practice to sign a wage
Yes.
receipt. If you don't, maybe keep a copy. Like if your employer doesn't provide you with a receipt, maybe make a copy yourself, make a record yourself. Because not inevitably, but if there is an issue like a dispute, if wages is paid by cash, there's always this argument about whether it's been paid, whether it's the right amount, whether this or that. So it's always good to keep a record of these things. And how many of you get food allowance? Okay. So if your employer doesn't provide you with food, then the employer should provide you with additional food allowance, so 1,236. How many of you eat with your employer but the food is not enough, or it's not what you like, or nobody has this issue? You do?
We always need to finish the leftover, even it's like he likes spicy food, but we cannot eat spicy food.
Okay, so what do? You buy your
So we
food?
buy by our own.
You buy by your own. Okay. So this is unfortunately a common issue. A lot of workers, even though the employer provides food, the food may not be enough. It may not be suitable. Like you don't get spicy food, but your employer likes spicy food. It's a tricky issue to handle, but I would suggest having an open discussion with your employer if this ever was an issue, and or even suggesting, that maybe they give you the food allowance for you to buy and make your own food instead of you eating with them, because the food is just not suitable. And food is important. Like if I don't eat, I cannot work with, and you guys work a lot with your bodies, so you need proper food. Yeah. Any questions on wages? Oh, I have one more question. So sometimes on the contract, your wages may be the statutory minimum. So let's say 4,990, but the employer actually gives you more. Let's say the employer is actually giving you 5,000 or 6,000. Is that okay? Is it okay that the salary you actually? So the reason I ask is, again, if in the future there is a dispute, it's always good to have a record of your real salary, okay? Because if on the contract the salary is lesser than the actual salary that you receive, and if there's a dispute, what we usually do is we use, of course, a higher salary to help you guys computate your entitlements. But you need proof. You need proof to show that your actual salary is, let's say, 5,000 or whatever. So that's why it's important to have receipts. Yes.
Yes, my employer have like that. My salary
sure that you have a record, because I have one lady who's a driver whose actual salary was $10,000, but on the salary receipt it said 6,000, and she signed them. So it's really hard for me to argue for her that her real salary is 10,000 when she had a labor claim. So it's important that if you do sign a salary receipt, that the receipt is correct, okay? Make sure you read it and make sure it's accurate. Right. Okay, this is an issue that comes up quite a lot with the clients that we see, salary deduction. Can your employer deduct your salary? Is it legal?
No.
Some say no. So the answer is that under some circumstances, yes. Yes, the employer can deduct under very specific circumstances. Okay, so there are two key areas that are relevant for that are more relevant for OFWs. The first is if you've damaged or lost the employer's items. Okay, but you have to be mindful that the maximum amount that the employer can deduct per item is $300. Okay, $300 per item. That's the maximum. So even if, like, I hope it doesn't happen, but even if you crash your car and it costs a lot of money, the maximum is $300.
300.
How about the driver? For example, there's a damage on the car.
Yes.
More than 1,000.
Yes. So
Can the boss will deduct for me?
no, that's
300
what I'm
only.
saying.
So that's still
the maximum
even
is
it's a driver.
even if it's the driver. Yeah. So this law applies to everyone. It applies to me. It applies to everyone who's employed in Hong Kong. The maximum that the employer can deduct is only $300. So sometimes the employer, I have cases where the worker might have, I don't know, damaged a washing machine, and the employer said, "Oh, I need to deduct half of your salary." That's not legal. Okay. The maximum per item is $300, and the total deduction for damaged item cannot exceed 25% of your salary. Okay, so even if you damage like multiple things, the total deduction cannot exceed 1/4 of your salary. So the employer cannot be like, "Oh, you damaged the TV, the washing machine, this and that, blah, 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 blah," and then end up deducting your entire salary. That's not allowed under the law in Hong Kong. Okay, the maximum deduction is only 1/4 of your salary. And so can the employer deduct your salary if, let's say, the child, you were supposed to take the child to school, but then you were late? So you made a mistake, let's say. Can the employer deduct your salary? No.
No.
So again, important to remember, because some employers try to deduct salary if their workers made a mistake or something like that, that is not allowed, okay? So, yes. So like transport and all that. That's again not very clear under the ordinance. It doesn't really explain whether, like, who should bear those kind of costs. But again, I would suggest that if this happened to any of you, to talk to your employer and just say, "Look, it doesn't make sense for me to pay for my own transport when I'm working, so you should pay for my octopus top-up," for example. Yeah. So there's another situation that your employer can deduct your salary, which is not on the PowerPoint. It is if your employer has made a loan, like an advancement or a loan to you. I know that a lot of you have a lot of financial pressure, maybe supporting a lot of family members back home, so from time to time you may need to take out loans from your employer. So if your employer has make a loan for you, they can deduct your salary to recover that loan, but the total deduction cannot exceed 50% of your salary. Okay, so the employer again cannot be like, "Oh, I've advanced let's say the employer advanced your October loan, and then in November the employer said, "I'm not going to pay you anything because I already advanced your loan." That's actually not allowed under the law. Okay, the maximum they can deduct is 50% of your salary. So again, if this happens to you or your friends, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to give you some more information about this. Like, loans is a whole different issue. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I'm just mentioning it because I know it happens to a lot of clients. If your employer is deducting your salary, again, really important to make a record. So for example, on your wage receipt, make a record what has been deducted, how much has been deducted, because if you need to contest it, you have that record, right? So you can go to labor, or you can come to us, and we can help you see if it's legal. rest day. So, do you all get one rest day per week?
Yes.
Yes.
But we are Cinderella, we have time.
You have time. You're Cinderellas, yes. You have curfew, yeah, I know. So, under the employment law in Hong Kong, a rest day means a full 24-hour rest day. I know for a lot of you that is not possible. Maybe the
Yes.
employer will ask you to work a little bit, go home early, go home by 8, or work a little bit before you leave, maybe make breakfast or whatever, like walk the dog on Sunday before you go. Like very technically speaking, that is actually not allowed. So you can actually tell your employer that I am entitled to full 24-hour rest day, and so I'm not going to work on Sunday. But I know practically it's not. It's difficult. I understand it's difficult. But sorry. Yeah. I know it's. I know it may not be very practical, but it's something that you can think about, like bringing up with your employer. You can tell them that, look, sir, madam, like actually I shouldn't be working, so do you mind if I do this on Monday? Or do you mind if I don't do this? Even if you have a curfew when you get home, they shouldn't be asking you to, wash the dishes, make dinner, put the kids to bed, like all those, like even if you have to be home, you should still be able to rest. So you can rest in your room, do your own thing. So full 24 hours. So
What
yes.
is like, you're sleeping with a kid?
Yeah, so I understand.
Like,
That's why I understand it is practically can be very difficult. But again, this is different with each of you. Maybe you have a different relationship with your employer. Your work is different, so it's for you to judge how you want to manage this. I guess like there's no one size fit all answer. Yeah. So what if your employer asks you to work on Sunday? Let's say, I don't know, let's say a grandma is here to visit. Can you work this Sunday? It's okay, but yeah, you can. Sometimes you're being paid extra days. That's okay. Or your employer needs to give you an alternative day. Like under the law, it says within 30 days. So within a month, the employer needs to give you an alternative day. So they may say, okay, you can go on Wednesday instead or whatever. But you may prefer to be paid, which is okay. If your employer is not giving you a rest day, or if any of your friends are like working continuously without rest, again, that's a problem and they should get some advice. How do you compute the rest day pay? Do you guys know? Like how do you, so if, let's say if you have to work on a Sunday, how do you calculate your daily pay? So these are, this is using the old wages from 2023 4870. But yeah, just for your own reference, the way to compute your daily pay rate is your monthly salary divided by the number of days in that month. So yeah, for example, if your salary is 4870, then your daily allowance is 162. So your employer should pay you 162 extra if they're asking you to work an extra Sunday, for example. Yeah.
30 days yun.
So it depends. So there are actually two ways. This is the first method. Your monthly salary divided by the number of days in that month. Or second method is so it's your monthly salary times 12. So your entire month, your entire yearly salary divided by 365. So the number of days in that year. Does that make sense? Yeah. Just a reference so that you know roughly. Okay. Right, accommodation. So someone else mentioned before, what if you sleep with the kids? So does your contract specify your accommodation?
Yes.
Okay, good. Do you guys know what your sleeping arrangement is before you start working with your employer?
yeah.
Yeah. So you've read it. Okay, that's good. So a lot of workers didn't really read through the contract before they start their employment, and then they may end up being asked to sleep in the living room or in the kitchen or in the balcony. I know Hong Kong is very small, but the employer has a responsibility to provide proper accommodation, and it's actually in your contract. So if you sign a new contract, for example, make sure you ask about the accommodation and check that it is written down accurately on the contract, because I also have cases where on the contract it says you get your own room, blah blah blah, and then when you get there, you were asked to sleep on the balcony or something like that. So yes. it's arguable. It depends on whether the employer has declared it truthfully on the contract, because theoretically the employer needs to disclose the accommodation on the contract, and when that's submitted to the immigration will assess whether that is appropriate. But what tends to happen sometimes is that the employer will say something else, so they'll say that the worker has a room or whatever, but then when the worker gets there, it's entirely different. So that's actually a breach of contract. So theoretically, the worker can say that I'm not going to continue working here because I don't have proper accommodation, and it's a deviation from my employment terms, for example. But it is, again, one of those areas where I know for a lot of workers it's really hard because, they pay a lot of money for agency fee recruitment to work in Hong Kong, and just to break your contract because of accommodation may not be very feasible for a lot of workers. So make sure you check your contract, especially when you sign a new contract with a new employer. So some examples of unsuitable accommodation could be makeshift beds in corridors, as I mentioned, or having to share rooms with adults of opposite sex. So like teenagers, like if it's like a 16-year-old boy, for example, that wouldn't be appropriate. Yeah. Any questions on accommodation? Anybody has any horror stories to share? You guys seem to have okay employers. You guys seem to have okay. And again, so your work duties is actually specified in your contract. And again, when you sign a new contract, make sure you read the work duties. So for example, some of you might have driving duties, I presume, or some of you may need to look after very young babies or animals. It should all be on your contract. And if you enter into a new employment, it's really important to double check your duties with your employer, because we again have cases where workers are asked to, let's say, work at an office, work at the employer's office, or help clean the employer's office. Is that legal? Is that domestic duties? No. Yeah. So that is actually, again, a breach of condition of stay. So it's really important that you are not asked to do things that are not in your contract and that are not domestic duties. So what if the employer say, I have a Taobao business, I sell clothes. Can you go pick up, I don't know, clothes from this warehouse and bring it home? Is that domestic duties? Yes? Some say yes, some say no. Well, it's like a gray area. I'd say it's not domestic duty, because domestic duties means housework, basically, right? So if you're picking things up from warehouse, bring them home, that is not domestic duties. And again, if this happens to any of you or your friends, make sure you get advice, because it may not be legal. Yes.
What about disciplining children?
That's so. If the employer, I guess, asked you or gave you express permission, but it's an area that you really need to be very open with your employer about, like what they expect of you and what you can or cannot do. Because I understand that some of you may have worked for the same family for a really long time. You may really know the family or the kids, and you know what works, and the employer trusts you. But also it can become an issue. So I've had cases where the worker kind of slapped the kid's hand, and then the employer called the police saying that the worker is abusing the child. So again, these things can be very tricky. So especially if it's a new employer, new family that you're working for, make sure you talk to them about what is acceptable, because you don't want to be in that situation where you're suddenly accused of child abuse. Like, it's a serious thing to be accused of, and it took a really long time for us to help that worker to get out of that situation. So yeah, it's a good question, but make sure you talk to your employer about what is and isn't acceptable. Yeah. Yes.
We've had issues where children have bitten their hair, where they've thrown things at them, hit them. Any counsel?
Yeah, so I've also had a few cases where the child is very violent towards